Imagine you're standing outside this heavy wooden door. You've literally been knocking for days. I mean, your knuckles are bleeding, your throat is completely raw from calling out, and you are just utterly exhausted.
Right, and you know the person inside can hear you.
Exactly. You know they are sitting right there on the other side.
Mm.
But the lock never turns. The handle never jiggles. Nothing happens. So why do you stay? Like, why don't you just walk away?
It's such a terrifying question, honestly, because the answer defies all logic. But it's this universal human trap, which is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Yeah, we're looking at a piece of source material today that just completely deconstructs this dynamic. It's an evocative, deeply emotional Telugu poetic lyric.
And a really powerful one at that.
Oh, absolutely. The title is Ninoka Prima Pipasini Nivoka Ashrama Vasivi. And in English, that roughly translates to, I am a thirsty seeker of love, and you are an ashram dweller. So our mission today is to figure out the internal mechanics of this text. Like, what happens when desperate, unrequited devotion collides with absolute, immovable detachment?
Well, what's so remarkable about this text is that it doesn't just, describe the pain of rejection. It really dissects the anatomy of it.
Right.
It looks at why we trap ourselves in these cycles, like how we romanticize our own destruction and the literal elemental shift that happens inside a person when their emotional energy is given absolutely nowhere to go.
Yeah, and right out of the gate, the text establishes this fundamental incompatibility.
Mm-hmm.
The speaker calls themselves a prima pipasini, and the subject is an ashrama vasivi.
Which are very loaded terms.
Exactly. I have the broad strokes here, like a thirsty seeker and an ashram dweller.
Mm.
But break down the psychological weight of those specific archetypes for me, because this doesn't feel like your standard boy meets girl who isn't interested scenario.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, the choice of those two specific words is highly deliberate. Let's look at Pipasini first. It implies a seeker, yes, but specifically one driven by an existential thirst. And thirst isn't just a casual desire, right?
No, it's a biological imperative.
Exactly. When you are truly parched, seeking water is the only thing your brain allows you to focus on. It's this intensely outward-reaching, desperate state of being.
Wow. Okay. And then the counter to that is the ashram dweller.
Right, the ashram is a CV. Historically and culturally, an ashram dweller is an ascetic. It's someone who is consciously and intensely retreated from worldly desires.
So they're completely walled off.
Pretty much. Their entire existence is built around inward reflection, discipline, and detachment. So the text immediately contrasts these two states with a brilliant juxtaposition.
Right. The speaker says, my thirst is unquenchable, and then immediately follows it with, your heart is immovable.
Yes, an unstoppable force meeting a truly immovable object.
It makes me think of like a broken electrical circuit.
Yeah.
You have this massive power source, the seeker, pumping out all this high voltage electricity.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. But the ascetic is a cut wire. There's no ground.
Right.
So the energy has absolutely nowhere to flow.
Mm.
And we know what happens to a live wire when the current can't complete its circuit.
The wires heat up.
Exactly. They heat up, they melt, and eventually they catch fire. Which, spoiler alert, is a very literal prediction later in the text.
It really is.
But I want to hypothesize something here. If we pull back from a strictly romantic interpretation, could this dynamic represent any scenario in your life where you are completely outward-reaching and the object of your focus is fundamentally inward-looking?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the genius of the text is how perfectly it maps onto broader human experiences. Like, this could be a career path you're desperately trying to break into.
Oh, totally. Where the industry itself is an entirely closed ecosystem.
Exactly. Or it could be a familial relationship with a parent who is just emotionally walled off. The ashram dweller isn't necessarily acting out of malice,
Right, they aren't actively trying to hurt the seeker.
No, their very nature, being immovable and detached, simply exists in direct opposition to the seeker's nature. It's not that the ascetic is listening and choosing to ignore them. It's that they operate on a frequency the seeker doesn't even have access to.
Man, so the receiver is just dismantled.
Yeah.
So we have this abstract friction established, but the text doesn't stay abstract for long, right?
No, it gets very grounded very quickly.
Yeah, it moves into the physical reality of what it actually looks like to live in this dynamic. The text describes standing at the threshold day and night, even when the door is firmly closed.
The threshold is such a fascinating psychological space. In literature, and honestly in our own minds, a threshold is a liminal space.
Like a border.
Exactly. You aren't in the outside world anymore, but you aren't inside the sanctum either. You're just suspended. And that closed door is the physical manifestation of the ascetic's immovable heart.
And here's where the text introduces this brutal, exhausting cycle. The speaker describes calling out repeatedly, getting zero reply, and eventually turning back completely exhausted.
It's incredibly draining.
Right. And if you've ever found yourself in this situation, you know the tragedy isn't just that the door stays closed. The real tragedy is the sheer exhaustion of the effort.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about aggressively refreshing a web page that you absolutely know is offline. Like the server is completely down.
But you keep hitting refresh anyway.
Over and over, draining your phone's battery, draining your own patience. You're completely drained by the process, but you feel this irrational, almost biological compulsion to keep hitting the button just in case something magically changes.
That web page analogy works beautifully because it really highlights the illusion of control, and that is the core psychological trap of the threshold.
Wait, what do you mean by illusion of control?
Well, why doesn't the seeker just walk away from the closed door? It's because of intermittent reinforcement.
No, like a slot machine?
Precisely. It's the exact same psychological mechanism.
Right.
If you face a solid brick wall, your brain processes the finality of it, and you eventually walk away.
Right, because a wall is just a wall.
But a door implies a hinge. It implies a handle. A door could technically be opened. And that tiny bit of uncertainty is what keeps the seeker trapped.
Wow. So the mere possibility of the door opening is actually the most destructive part of the whole architecture.
Yes, exactly. And the text reveals a really dark truth about this cyclical pain. The speaker calls out, gets no reply, and retreats in exhaustion.
Right.
But notice what happens. That exhaustion doesn't cure their thirst. It just forces a temporary physical retreat. They are essentially retreating just to catch their breath.
Oh, man. So their emotional state hasn't shifted an inch.
Not at all. So the moment their physical stamina regenerates, that unquenchable thirst drives them right back to the door to begin the whole agonizing cycle all over again.
They are resting literally just so they have the energy to come back and be ignored again. That is a terrifying loop to be stuck in.
It really is.
Which brings up a massive question.
Right. But there is entirely a psychological ego defense. By elevating the unavailable person to a godlike status and elevating their own unrequited love to this holy devotion, the speaker protects themselves from a much harsher reality.
Because it's deeply humiliating to admit you're wasting your life waiting for someone who just doesn't care.
Exactly. But if you tell yourself you are a devoted disciple demonstrating pure selfless love, suddenly your suffering isn't pathetic anymore. It's noble.
It's martyrdom.
Exactly. It's self-martyrdom to protect the ego.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little because there is a line here that genuinely bothers me.
Oh, which one?
The speaker talks about calling their hands to beg for the alms of love. Alms. Like a beggar. Doesn't framing love as charity completely destroy any sense of equality? Like, why reduce yourself to that level?
Well, it absolutely destroys equality, but honestly, that's the point. The speaker has surrendered all agency. When you ask for alms, you are entirely dependent on the grace of the person holding the power. You're saying, I have nothing, and you have everything, and my survival depends entirely on what you choose to drop into my hands.
Man, it's a complete abdication of self-worth.
It is, and it gets even more extreme.
Yeah, the text describes the ultimate sacrifice. The speaker spreads their heart out like a carpet for the beloved to step on. Now, logically, spreading your heart on the floor where someone walks is just inviting your own destruction.
It's basically saying, please crush me.
Exactly. It seems so self-destructive.
It does. But the text then delivers what I consider the most profound psychological insight in the entire piece.
Oh, what's that?
So the speaker lays their heart down for the ascetic to step on, but then they make this devastating admission. They say they were completely crushed before the beloved even arrived.
Wait, really? Before a single step was ever taken?
Yes. The ascetic never actually steps on the heart.
Oh, wow. So the devastation is 100% self-inflicted.
Completely. The speaker is crushed not by the physical weight of the ascetic's footsteps, but by the crushing psychological weight of their own unfulfilled anticipation.
That completely flips the script. I mean, the ascetic literally did nothing.
Nothing at all.
Their absence is just as destructive as their presence would be because the seeker has constructed this massive internal pressure cooker.
Exactly. They built an entire ritual around an event, the door opening, the ascetic walking out, that is just never going to happen.
So the anticipation just builds and builds until it collapses in on itself.
Right. The ascetic is completely independent. The seeker made themselves entirely dependent. And when you attach your entire emotional survival to an immovable object, You are the one who breaks.
And the immovable object remains perfectly intact.
Exactly.
That is heavy. It's this stark realization that you are doing the work of breaking your own heart while waiting around for someone else to do it.
It really is tragic.
So we have this setup. We have the exhaustion of the threshold, and we have this intense, self-inflicted martyrdom. Where does a cycle like that actually lead? Because it clearly can't go on forever.
No, it can't.
The human body and mind just can't sustain that level of output with zero input.
And that leads us to the final evolution of the text, which moves away from the present suffering and looks forward to a very grim, haunting inevitability.
Okay.
It starts by grounding us in the relentless passage of time. The text describes day bidding farewell to night and night bidding farewell to day. The seasons are changing, the earth is spinning, the rest of the world is moving forward.
But the speaker is completely static, like suspended at that threshold.
Exactly. Time is indifferent to their pain. And while the world moves on, the internal state of the speaker is reaching a critical mass. They describe having a burning, feverish heart. They are crying out, begging just to be heard.
Which honestly feels like a massive downgrade from what they originally wanted. Earlier, they wanted the unquenchable thirst satisfied. They wanted the alms of love. Now they're just saying, if my words just reach your ears, that's enough.
Right. It's like they realize the love is never coming, so they're bargaining for simple validation.
Just look at me. Just acknowledge that I exist outside this door.
It is the final, desperate gasp of the ego trying to confirm it is still alive. But then the text offers this tragic foresight.
Okay.
The speaker looks into the future and predicts that the ascetic will eventually see them in the shadows of their memories. The speaker is envisioning a day when the ascetic looks back, realizes the depth of the devotion that was waiting outside their door, and feels regret.
Okay, let's unpack that because it feels like a very sudden shift in the power dynamic.
How so?
Well, throughout this whole piece, the speaker has been powerless. Begging, waiting, exhausting themselves, laying their heart on the floor. But right here, at the very end, by predicting the ascetic's future regret, by essentially saying, one day you are going to realize what you missed out on. Are they finally taking back a little sliver of control? Like, are they reclaiming their agency in their final moments?
It's a really compelling theory, but I actually think the reality is much more tragic than that.
Really?
Yeah. This prediction isn't a reclamation of power. It is the ultimate coping mechanism for a mind that is breaking.
Oh, I see.
The speaker needs to believe that their pain wasn't entirely invisible. They need to believe that this massive expenditure of energy will eventually register on the ascetic's radar, even if it's years down the line.
Because otherwise it was all for absolutely nothing.
Exactly. But the final fatalistic line of the lyric completely undercuts any sense of victory or agency.
Right, the final line. Before you can realize or confess your love, I will have already turned to ashes.
Turn to ashes. It is such a definitive, irreversible state, and it completes the most brilliant, tragic arc of the entire text.
Because of how it started?
Yes. Think about how the lyric began. The speaker defined themselves by their thirst, a liquid metaphor.
Right.
They were seeking water to quench an essential biological need. But the text ends with them turning to ashes, a fire metaphor.
That elemental shift is just staggering. It goes right back to that broken electrical circuit analogy we talked about.
It perfectly aligns with it.
We have all this high-voltage emotional energy flowing out, but it's met with an immovable, detached wall. It has absolutely nowhere to ground itself.
So the energy turns inward.
Exactly. The unrequited devotion didn't water a garden. It sparked a friction fire that consumed the seeker from the inside out.
It's the thermodynamics of emotion. Energy cannot be destroyed, right? It only changes form. The outward thrust of love, when completely blocked, turns into an inward burning fever. And that fever eventually reduces the host to ash.
They are a soul completely consumed by its own unreturned energy.
Yes.
To start as someone simply seeking a connection, seeking water, and to end as literal ash because that connection was denied. It is a stunning, terrifying transformation.
It's a masterclass in emotional escalation. It maps perfectly onto how the human mind handles the trauma of a completely unresponsive reality.
Yeah, and when we look at the entire journey this source text has taken us on, the architecture of it is just brilliant.
It really is.
It starts with that raw friction between the thirsty seeker and the detached ascetic. It moves into the grueling physical reality of standing at a closed door, caught in that trap of intermittent reinforcement where you just can't stop checking to see if the lock is turned.
Right.
Then it dives into the psychological defense mechanisms. Like how we ritualize our pain, how we turn ourselves into martyrs and lay our hearts on the floor, ultimately crushing ourselves under the weight of our own impossible anticipation.
And then the inevitable conclusion.
Exactly. It shows us the inevitable physics of unspent emotion. A thirst that goes unquenched doesn't just fade away. It heats up, it
Yeah.
burns, and it turns the seeker to ashes long before the immovable object ever even notices the smoke.
Perfectly said.
And the reason we wanted to dive so deeply into this today is because while this text is a poetic, heightened reality, the psychological trap it describes is incredibly common.
Oh, absolutely. We all face it.
We all have thresholds we need to walk away from, you know? We all have doors in our lives that we're obsessively staring at, just hoping the handle will turn.
And it takes many forms.
Maybe it's a one-sided relationship where you're constantly offering flowers and begging for alms, convincing yourself it's noble devotion instead of self-destruction. Maybe it's a career ambition that just keeps leaving you exhausted on the doorstep. Or maybe it's an idealized version of a person who simply does not exist on the same frequency as you do.
That's the real warning hidden within the poetry. The danger isn't just that you won't get the water you're looking for.
No, the danger is that the process of waiting for it will fundamentally change your elemental makeup. It will consume you.
It forces you to really examine the closed doors in your own life. But, as we wrap up our analysis of this text, there's one final detail that completely reframes the entire dynamic.
Oh, what's that?
It's something the speaker admits almost casually at the end. They say they will turn to ashes before the ascetic ever realizes their love. The door remains firmly closed until the very end.
Right, the ascetic never actually sees the devotion.
Exactly. But they also never see the destruction.
Oh, wow.
So it forces us to look at that barrier one last time and ask a very dark question. Does that closed door actually protect the ascetic from the seeker's overwhelming thirsty love? Or does it simply protect the ascetic from ever having to witness the ashes their silence has created?